Hey folks, Michael Mann with Michael Mann Security Services. Welcome to Risk Assess Church Security or Threat. Hey, if you want to get a hold of us, you can get me at contact at michaelmannsecurityservice.com, or you can always call me at 615-956-3912, and let's get into it. Hey, today's agenda, we're going to review RACS, or Risk Assess Church Security, something we talked about last week. We're going to talk about the RACS elements, or the elements of RAC, and then we're going to talk about the threat piece of RACS itself and where that comes from. Okay, so RACS, again, what is Risk Assessed Church Security? This is where we're actually understanding our likelihood or threat, our vulnerabilities, and understanding also the consequence if this threat were to occur, these threats were to occur, hazards. So here's what Risk Assessed Church Security will do for you. Number one, it is going to identify your exposure to specific hazards or threats. So it's actually measuring your risk or helping you measure it. You get assurance versus fear. So you know what you need to defend the church against. This is not a guess. It's not based on the program that somebody from a church that you know of, 5 miles down the road, or somebody that you talk to online, or information you're getting off of a church security Facebook page, because believe it or not, you don't really want to do that. That's a bad idea. So when you do this, again, you know what you need to protect the church against. So again, you have this environment of assurance versus fear. Resources. You're going to save on resources once you know what you need to do. And now what you have is you have elements of prevention and mitigation versus just elements of response. Now I just don't have armed people that are going to respond to something because I know what I need to protect the church against. My strategy now prevents those threats, and it helps to actually lessen the impact if these things were to happen. So that's the importance of a risk assessed church security program. Now, the elements in RACS are always planning, and we talked about planning before. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about comprehensive church security or site security. I talked about your physical security assessments. I talked about your emergency action plans and your physical security plans. That's the planning piece of RACS. That is the planning part of risk assessed church security. The E stands for equipment, so what equipment you need, and not just the personal equipment or the individual equipment for your security team members, but all the other equipment that you need to do to accomplish this mission. It talks about the training that's required for staff members, volunteers, and your security folks, because there are other people involved in this more than likely, depending on the size of the church or the congregation. And then, of course, threat is also a big piece of this, and we're going to get into why threat or likelihood, even though we address it in planning, why do we need to focus on that here? Why is that part of another separate element of RACS itself? So we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, when we start to talk about threat or likelihood, or the threats that you're going to face, are determined in your physical security assessment. Now, I have seen physical security assessments. In fact, we just had one somewhere, or managed a piece of one, where the assessor did not actually do a threat assessment in the physical security assessment of the survey. It's not always necessary to do that, but in the church it is, in this case, because we are trying to get some sort of measure of risk here. So your threat or likelihood is part of the threat assessment that is included in your physical security assessment. And guys, it's important that you guys get one. You need to have a PSA. This is going to be your roadmap for what you're going to do forward for the next 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, in your security program. Now, in the threat assessment, there are categories of threats. And whoever does your physical security assessment or your PSA should be certified to do those PSAs. Like, they should have some sort of a document or certificate that says they've been trained and certified in conducting physical security assessments. If they have not, if they don't have that certificate of that training, I would look for somebody that does. Okay. Now, there are categories of threats. There are more than just intentional threats. And most of the time, threat assessments, for those that have not been trained in conducting physical security assessments, will focus on intentional threats only, specifically in the churches. There are other categories of threats to include unintentional and natural and others. So those all need to be included in the threat assessment that's included in the PSA. And the reason why this is important is because your physical security measures must be in accordance or commensurate with the threat. If not, what you're doing, number one, is you are actually spending resources on something that you may not need to. And then also, if we focus only on the intentional threat, you can end up creating or inducing more risk to your church. So you need to be careful. The threat assessment is a big part of the PSA because, again, physical security measures are always commensurate with the threat. Always. That is the way that physical protection works. Okay. Now, if you've got any questions, again, you can contact me at Michael Mann or contact at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. You can call me at 615-956-3912. Folks, our services include physical security assessments. We are board certified in physical security, certified in Carver, RAM, multiple physical security assessment and risk assessment methodologies. We create, develop, and implement emergency action plans and have years of experience writing those for different organizations, entities, and environments to include churches, ministries, private schools, nuclear fuel facilities, chemical facilities, production sites, you name it, we've got experience doing it. We write physical security plans, and again, have years of experience writing those PSPs or plans. We provide training programs for your volunteer teams and for your staff, and also we provide contract security services for churches and ministries. And remember, folks, it is about prevention, not response.